Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next panel for Good Money Gone Bad. Tom Galvin, Executive Director, Digital Citizens Alliance. Mark Gill, President, Millennium Films. Mark Burns, Vice President, MediaLink. Hemant Shunigam, CEO, SSP Blue. Please welcome U.S. Congresswoman Judy Chu, 27th Congressional District, who will be joining us from our nation's capital via Google Hangout. And a warm welcome for our moderator, Ted Johnson, Senior Editor at Variety.
Give a round to everyone here. First off, I love the name of this panel, Good Money Gone Bad. It's a very provocative title. And I think, and I hope, that it helps call attention to the problem of piracy. I want to start off with Tom Galvin, Executive Director of the Digital Citizens Alliance. They have a report that's going to come out in about 3 weeks. It's a follow-up to a report that came out last year, which found that ad networks were collecting about $227 million last year from piracy. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about, give us a peek at what this new report is going to say?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. And thank you for moderating the panel, and Ned Sherman and all the folks at Digital Entertainment World for this great event. We did a study, first I'm Tom Galvin with the Digital Citizens Alliance. We did a study with MediaLink, and Mark can talk a little bit more about it, in late 2013 that tried to give a snapshot of what was going on in ad-supported content theft. And we looked at 596 sites. So we wanted to kind of track these sites and see what was happening, how they were evolving. And our study that will come out in a few weeks shows about 589 sites at this point. The interesting thing is only 56% of those sites are from the original ones from a year ago. So to put that in perspective, nearly half have changed, but new ones have come on board to replace them. And so if you're trying to come to grips with this issue, or if you're law enforcement trying to deal with that, imagine the difficulty if every year about half of your targets and potential criminals are changing. So as we looked at the report, we found a couple things. And they're kind of alarming and troubling in their own self. The first is that content theft is not only a crime against artists, but it's also a crime against consumers as well. And the reason for that is as we looked at this, we found that about 1 in 3 sites that we looked at exposed consumers to malware, usually through a click, whether an ad or whatever it is. And that's a dangerous thing because, of course, consumers don't know when they're going on a content theft site, which they may or may not know it's content theft to begin with, that they're going to be exposed to malware from going on that. So that's a troubling thing and something as a consumer group we're really focused on. The other thing that we found really alarming is the rise of streaming. It was by far the largest growth area in that. And if you think of content theft as the incentive to do it, you're talking about companies that are creating a business model around essentially repurposing other people's content. And in many instances, we found their margin was between 80 and 90%.
Wow.
And the only way you can have a margin of 80 to 90% is because you're not creating anything, you're just essentially providing it to others. So that's something. We have a couple slides we want to look at. You'll see on this the rise of streaming. It's the purple piece of pizza that's on that slide. And you'll see that that's grown from 13 to 18% as we did this. And that's where we've seen a majority of the growth. And again, if there's incentives for content thieves, that only perpetuates a business model that is harmful to an industry, but it means there's a perpetuation of harm to consumers who are now getting exposed to malware. And for folks to understand, malware can do a few bad things. It can expose your identity, it can expose your financial information, and it can also mean that your computer ends up being a bot, which gets used by hackers. There's a lot of bad things that come from there. So it's something we're tracking and trying to raise awareness about when it comes to the issues of content theft and malware.
I want to go to Mark Burns. He's Vice President at MediaLink. Mark, what are some of the implications as piracy goes to streaming? Does this make enforcement more difficult, for instance?
Well, sure, Ted, yeah, it does. Not only does it make enforcement more difficult, but the whole move to streaming follows general societal trend toward Netflix, toward all of the online streaming services. People become very accustomed to it. The benefit to, or the value to the pirate sites is that they have an opportunity to take advantage of higher rates, higher CPMs for video ads than are available for the more traditional and long-term display banner ads. In some cases, 8 or 9 times as much. The trend to video is increasing on the part of advertisers who have found, as we all know, right, all of us in this room are involved in media in one way or another, but sight, sound, and motion is attractive to consumers, which means it's attractive to advertisers. And as advertisers are moving their budgets from traditional TV to digital video, the demand is increasing. And as demand increases, price increases. So, globally, typical video ad CPMs are in the $8 to $12 range compared to $1 for banners. In the United States, the CPMs for video are more in the $25 range. So there's significant incentive for these folks to go after video advertising. And it's at no greater effort than it was just to do downloads and displays. You can see CPMs and growth in video. There's also more opportunity for fraud. These sites operate with significant levels of fraud in terms of generating more impressions, fraudulent clicks, and video carries higher fraud rates as well.
You just saw an ad for Expendables 3, which is probably one of the more notorious cases of piracy that occurred last year, where the movie leaked before its release, and it was suddenly out there. And sure enough, when the movie was released at the box office on opening day, it was notable because the box office return was much less than the previous 2 installments. Mark Gill is here from Millennium Films, the producer of the movie. And first of all, Mark, what was the financial hit you took?
Well, unfortunately, 60.8 million people have illegally downloaded the movie.
That was 60?
60.8.
60, okay.
And these are verified hashes, not people clicking on something that they thought was that, but turned out to be a porn site or what have you. This is all fully verified. That's from roughly July 18 or whenever the movie was hacked. It opened August 15 through January 20th of this year. So the way we think about the economics is the average worldwide ticket price in theater is about $8. The average for price per viewer for home entertainment and TV is roughly $4, video on demand, that sort of thing. Let's assume that it blends more toward people watching video on demand and TV, so that you have an average per viewer price of $5. So you can do that math. That's roughly a $300 million hit to largely, unfortunately, our distributors around the world, one of whom, the Russian distributor, a longtime partner of ours, was bankrupted by it, and many others of whom are having very, very difficult years just because they looked for these big movies to really allow them to sustain all the other movies they buy. So it didn't just hurt this movie, it's going to hurt a whole year's worth of movies.
And there has been an arrest, though, in London.
Two people were arrested in London and will be tried, and if they're convicted, which the evidence looks like probably that will be the result, they'll each get 20 years in jail, so that's at least a little heartening.
Himu Nigam, he is from SSB Blue. Himu, great to see you here. And I wanted to ask you about another aspect of the report, and that is more piracy migrating to smaller sites. I think that those are also in the trend lines. What are some of the implications of that? Again, does that make enforcement more difficult?
Yeah, and just to give perspective here, our company actually consults in the movie industry space in anything from product policy, PR, and safety, security, privacy. But I come from a federal law enforcement background. I also built the anti-piracy department, online anti-piracy department at MPA 15 years ago when this problem was first beginning. And at the time, the problem was only focused on if you have the resources, the technology, the capability, you're going to be able to create a pirated movie site. Now, anyone can create one, and all you need is bandwidth, and you need a server, half the time a hack server where you're going to store your data. So from an enforcement perspective, what you're seeing is a drastic shift where you can take down the biggest site in the world, like Pirate Bay was taken down, but a whole bunch of 5 others will show up to replace it. And they won't be just in the US. You're going to see them in Somalia, in some country that has laws that don't even protect on piracy or doesn't care about international cooperation. And so you're seeing a very drastic increase in the smaller ones taking a greater share of the revenue than just the bigger ones. Now, in a weird kind of way, what that translates to is that the pirated community or the piracy community itself is engaged in its own battles of who's going to win more customers and win more dollars. But the reality is there's more companies out there. So if you're enforcing, do you go after number 1, number 2, number 3? And is it in a country that's going to cooperate? So should I do that and spend resources on it? Or do I deal with online trafficking with women and children? And that's what enforcement is thinking. Where do I put my money? And in the meantime, these numbers just keep going up.
Yep.
The addressable space, the threat metrics is increasing is probably the best way to put it. So it's not just one speck on the map, it's a bunch of different specks on a map.
Yeah. I don't know if you all saw this, but there was a report out of Lloyd's of London on Friday in which the Dean of Insurance in the world said that he now views hacking of all forms as a bigger threat than global terrorism. In other words, uninsurable. So it's really becoming a big deal, and it's going to hurt all of us. It happens to have famously and publicly hurt some of us who are movie producers, but it's coming everywhere.
That brings up a big question, you know, because we're just coming off the Sony hack, big news throughout the month of December. Even though it was hacking, some piracy involved in it, do you think that has changed people's perceptions of piracy in any way? In other words, this view that piracy is not quite a crime, that it's kind of a victimless crime, is changing now to maybe something a little more insidious.
There's no question that that's starting to happen, and particularly in leadership circles. One of the other things we see is when President Obama declared this a national security threat, and I think that's correct. If you look at where movies are downloaded, the illegal views, 80.5% are outside the United States. If you look at the statistics about Americans who pirate, unfortunately 25% do, but fortunately 75% don't. So what we have here is a situation where we are getting crushed by people who are downloading America's best export and stealing it from us.
And by the way, on Expendables 3, do you have any idea of the breakdown, how much of that was downloading and how much of it was streaming?
We do. There's direct downloads, there are P2P downloads, and there's streaming. And roughly the P2P downloads were 53%. The streaming, I think, was something like 14 or 15%, and the rest was direct downloads. But you can see the streaming growing over the course of even the period in which we're tracking the data. There's one tiny bit of good news that's come out here, which is today the IAB and the ANA, these are advertising organizations, finally announced a trustworthy accountability group, which is going to try to stop the advertising, which is enormous, of very big brand names, including companies like Target that have been hacked on pirate sites, and that's how they make most of their money, right? So if that can get stopped, that will go a long way toward, I think, helping us out.
Here's Mark, question for you. You know, you would think that advertisers, the report last year showed that a lot of these blue chip advertisers were advertising on pirate sites. You would think advertisers would sound the alarm bells and say, I don't want my advertising on that site, especially if there's malware. What's taken so long?
Well, they did raise alarms, and we were told when we did our research last year that even one ad from a major brand showing up on one of these sites is a bad day for whoever the brand manager is. But the part of the problem is that the advertising ecosystem, the supply chain that delivers advertising from the point that it's bought to the point that it's seen is very complex. It's grown even more complex thanks to automated trading at very millisecond speeds to do a transaction, an auction, to get ads onto screens. So it's very easy for that to slip through the cracks. And obviously the Procters and Gambles and the Targets are not intending to put their ads on these sites. It's another form of fraud and scam and theft from the reputations of those brands.
I take a much more cynical view. It was very easy for these people to get off of child pornography sites and illegal pharmaceutical sites, and it took them a year and a half to do this. Are you joking? Come on. Yeah.
Another story behind that, although we're going to have to get back to it. I'm told that Congresswoman Judy Chu is now with us. She's the co-chair of the Creative Rights Congress, and she is here from DC. Congressman Chu, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. This event brings together some of the biggest names in the digital media space. Your innovation and creativity drive our economy, and digital entertainment has become one of the greatest American exports. In fact, the core copyright industries employ more than 5.5 million people and added over 1.1 trillion to our economy last year. And an industry that accounts for almost 7% of our economy must be protected. Yet because of bad actors misusing technology to steal with relative ease, the efforts and livelihood of creators are put at risk. It is more than simple linking and file sharing. Streaming websites with illegal content are on the rise now, and thanks to ubiquitous technology, any site that is shut down can easily pop again with a new identity. The challenge is made even more difficult by the enormous profit margins earned by these sites, sometimes ranging to over 90%. This is a crime, but more than our economy, it hurts people. It hurts the creators, the craftsmen and women, the artists, the technicians, and the millions who contribute to this industry. And that's why I started the bipartisan Congressional Creative Rights Caucus 2 years ago. It was imperative to get members of Congress to understand the real face of piracy. We've had educational briefings in Capitol Hill, as well as events that bring the actual artists and creators face to face with legislators. And through that, we are showing that the victims are real people for whom this is their livelihood and their means of supporting themselves and their families. I am proud to say that today our caucus has over 50 members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. There are many things we can do. We can encourage voluntary agreements. These collaborations between right holders, content holders, internet service providers, and consumer representatives have helped to strengthen the ethos of the internet and resulted in more than 1.3 million copyright alerts to account holders in America after just 1 year. I also want to applaud the Digital Citizen Alliance's efforts to follow the profits. With revenues so high for these illegal sites, reports like your good money gone bad can generate real attention. In fact, I was so happy to hear about the newest voluntary program announced today, the Brand Integrity Program Against Piracy, launched by the Trustworthy Accountability Group. This program will allow advertisers and athletes to prevent advertising from running on websites that are associated with piracy and counterfeit goods. So, you see, this approach is catching on, and I will continue to push for the tools needed to protect this industry and the people it employs. Thank you again for inviting me to speak today, and thank you for all that you do creating and protecting this truly American industry.
Thank you, Congressman Chu.
Can I mention one other
Sure.
initiative that's just kicking off in terms of the ad industry trying to tackle this problem? There's the TAG effort is certainly one that's been coming together, but kicking off this week, the Interactive Advertising Bureau, MediaLink has been very active in media value efforts, and MediaLink is working with the IAB to kick off a study by Ernst & Young that will be a very serious quantitative benchmarking study of the loopholes, the holes in the ecosystem and the supply chain that allow this to happen, as a way to set a benchmark so we'll know where these efforts are leading to fix the problem.
We've had some pretty dire scenarios here, especially with Expendables 3. I wanted to get to Himu and just ask you, where are the bright spots?
Well, and there are bright spots. I think, unfortunately, sometimes it is the horrible thing that happens that leads to the bright spot. I think one of the best things that's happened is, in America at least, mainstream America understands that the whole world of hackers is not something that just happens that they see on TV, but it could happen to them. And they could be a jumping point against their own country and things like that. And because of that shift in change of, oh, that's their problem, to that could be my problem, and tying to the impact it can have on the Hollywood industry, the movies that Americans love, I think people are starting to realize that this is our problem to deal with, and it has real impact on oftentimes people that they know, and it can have impact on their own systems. And I think a few things are going to happen. One is people are going to be more conscious of security in the consumer level, which is important, like Tom was talking about, the pirated sites that may have malware on it. Second, the industry itself is going to focus more on security, which is going to have a positive impact in the sense that, you know, less hackers will be able to successfully attack, or at least even if they do, they can get access to less information. The third is, and this is maybe not a bright spot, but every budget line, I think when Mark looks at his budget line, he's going to be thinking, okay, I have the budget for marketing the movie, but now I need a significant budget for actually protecting the movie in the anti-piracy side and not have to just rely on law enforcement, because ultimately this is going to have to become a self-protection kind of thing in the future.
And just to jump on that point, we used to think of content theft as something that affected very few. But if you look at digital media and digital content today, a lot of people make money off of putting things on places like YouTube. A lot of people, most people, many people now, express themselves on places like Facebook and other places, Instagram. And I think as this becomes more invested for more people, along with the issues of malware that can become a risk, you're going to have more people invested in the idea of a culture of respect for content. And that's, I think, where we need to get to. This isn't a problem for a small group of people. This is actually a problem as we all become creators. And more of us are creators, whether that's professionally or just to express our opinions about things. We want a culture of respect that fits there. And I think as people do that, we're going to see this become a growing awareness in the issue for the problem.
Yeah, the issue is now personal, and that's probably the best thing that's happening.
One more thing, and that is malware. I know this has been a big issue for Digital Citizens Alliance. I'm thinking, you know, do you see this growing? And isn't that, in a sense, something that's going to be a deterrent to piracy in the future, the whole idea?
Yeah, I mean, if there's 200 people in this room, and I know you're all not going to pirated sites, but if there's 200 people in this room and you're going to pirated sites, right now the statistics say 60 to 70 of you are going to be exposed to malware. It's easy to do, and if you look at this slide, you see that in terms of ads by type, malware and software downloads were the highest percentage. And we wanted to give one example here. The site Zoomvu, which is a site, mid-range site Mark could talk to us about, makes about probably makes around between $300,000 and $350,000 a year in ad-supported content theft. To put that in perspective, they're running a margin of about 90%, which means they're clearing $300,000 a year, and they probably have 3 or 4 people to work for them. That's your typical site. So you got 4 people making about $75,000 a year just off of essentially other people's content. This is the site we went to. It's called Zoomvu. The thing that's circled is to install the player. So we just wanted to do and demonstrate what happened. So when we tried to install that player, we got a virus detected on the bottom there. You see the box for a Trojan virus, which many people in the audience are familiar with what goes there. So if you click on something on these sites, you got a decent shot. You're going to be, there's a relatively decent shot. You're going to end up being exposed to malware.
And actually, even if you don't click, you've got a relatively decent.
Just being on the page.
So this site, you could see, essentially anywhere you clicked on this website, you were going to get malware.
That's right.
So this is a real problem affecting consumers, and the last thing you want is your computer being compromised for all the reasons we talked about. So I don't think this is, what we're seeing now is this is an American problem for lots of consumers. And when we did our own study looking at other things, we looked at porn sites, gambling sites, Main Street sites, and content theft sites. And we found you're 4 times more likely to get exposed to malware on a content theft site than you were on any of those other sites for reasons that go to, gambling, they want you to use your credit card, so they want you to feel safe. Porn sites want you to get to a subscription, so they want that. So it's a real problem, and it's going to exist. And as we raise awareness, we hope it makes a change.
Also, from your perspective, we brought this up right before we had the Congresswoman on, is the ad industry. Why have they been so slow to respond? As Mark says, hey, they got their ads off porn sites, other types of sites very quickly.
Yeah, I think it falls somewhere between the 2 marks, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think this is a complicated issue, and it does come down to the weakest link in an ad chain in the ecosystem. And however we got here now, what I think we're seeing with IAB and ANA and the others working on this, I think we're going to start to expose and isolate essentially the bad actors, because what they're creating is essentially a good housekeeping seal of approval. And if you're not willing to live up to those standards, you're going to be isolated because no one's going to be willing to work for you. Now is the time to measure and judge them, because if this thing continues based on this, there should be no excuse.
Well, there's one other bad actor to mention, and that's the credit card companies.
Yeah.
PayPal has done a much better job of getting out of the way, but Visa, MasterCard, and so on, not doing a very good job of protecting us, and a lot of people buying premium subscriptions, downloads, what have you, with their credit cards, and being enabled, it's no different from I'm going to enable you to buy the gas for the getaway car after you rob the bank. It's not okay.
Just on that, we did a study that looked at cyber lockers, 30 top cyber lockers engaging in content theft, and 29 of the 30 accepted credit cards. And so that, to your point, it exists, and we need all the facilitators and enablers to essentially step up and take this seriously.
Yeah, and I will say, Ted, and having worked inside of Microsoft and companies like that, and Fox and News Corp, what you find is if you have the right moral compass, you can do something about it from a technological perspective. And I think people often say, well, there's nothing I can do, I'm not the problem. But if every person that is an enabler, like Tom was just talking about, if you're anywhere in that chain of enablers, you actually do have the technological capability to do it. You just have to put your mind to it and say, I am going to do something, rather than looking at your bottom line and saying, my revenue potential is going up. It's a cost of doing business. It shouldn't be a cost of doing business. It should be the piece that says, we're never going to go there. And I think that's the shift that reports like this are going to eventually have in the end.
I think we're running overtime, actually, but I wanted to just have one final question. Maybe Mark Gill, you could answer this, and that is the entertainment industry has tried for years to have a message about piracy. So many different things have been tried over and over again. Any insight on what can be done better?
Yes, 3 things. The first and the most important is to stop the sources of revenue for the pirates. So advertising and credit card, if you shut those 2 things off, that'll make a huge difference. But the second thing, and I think this is really crucial, is education, which is a long-term game plan and potentially legislation that goes with that. And the third thing, I think, and I think this is vital, is it's no longer just about us trying to protect our movies, or our artists trying to protect their music, or software companies trying to protect their software. It really is now going to become a consumer issue. I think you said it well. It's going to become personal. If now I go to download something and I get something that's going to grab my identity and steal my credit cards and kind of put a big dent in my life, all of a sudden, I'm not so sure I want to be going anywhere near those places anymore. And that's really what's coming. So I do believe, finally, we're getting to the place where we're all in it together, and that's going to make the difference.
Tom, Mark, and Himu, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you to the panelists for Good Money Gone Bad. That concludes our sessions for the day. Please join us for the due opening day reception with music, cocktails, and food, sponsored by the Digital Citizens Alliance in the California Lounge. Thank you.